Welcome to another episode of Mindset Makeovers. My name is Lena and I'm so excited for the conversation that is about to unfold today. So I like to think of this podcast and these conversations as being like a constant evolving co-creation of what a self-help manual could be, a guide offering a philosophy of like soulful living and techniques for dealing with everyday challenges and problems and gritty bits without striving for perfection or salvation. And so I look for people to be in conversation with that can offer up a genuine, authentic perspective, meaning that they are people that are willing to bravely speak just from the moment that they are in, to speak from the heart, to share what they know, to be with whatever is arising. And I know the woman in front of me today will bring just that to us. So I would love to introduce to you through this conversation the beautiful Danni Willow. Welcome, Danni.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, I'm so touched with that introduction. That was so beautiful. Thank you so much for having me on the show. It feels, really, really powerful to be here and talk to you today.
I'm so glad. Before we get started, could you just summarize for us very quickly your work, what you do, what you focus on, just to give a little bit of context for this conversation?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I was a primary school teacher. I worked in early childhood for a couple of years before having kids. And then, and basically my girls sort of birthed this whole part of me that I didn't know existed as a woman, I think, very separate to the mothering role, which was very much about, just listening to my own feelings and realizing that there was a whole inner part of me that needed to be heard and held and loved on, because I wasn't parented in a way that was really nurturing and loving. Sort of grew up with a very strict authoritarian parenting style, which had lots of corporal punishments and times out. And so there was a really large part of my childhood, particularly in my teenage years, where I felt really disconnected from myself and went into ways of suppressing that through drugs and alcohol and sex, and just really numbed myself out from who I was. And I think when I had my two girls at birth, this whole new part of me that I didn't know needed help, and it needed support, and it needed nurturing. And so then I went down this path of looking at all these different parenting styles, and finally, after sort of dipping my toes in lots of different places, I found aware parenting. And that just resonated so much for me, because it was about really getting everyone's needs met in the family, when often, if we're attachment parenting, we're just up all night breastfeeding and rocking and patting and just not meeting the needs of ourselves as a mother and as a woman. And so, that led me down this path of running mother circles and doing one-to-one consults and really reparenting ourselves, like really going into our inner child and holding her and loving on her so that we can show up as the best, most authentic versions of ourselves for our children. That's it in a nutshell.
Incredible. And I'd love if you're willing to and you're able to. I was actually in conversation with a woman the other day, and we were talking about attachment parenting. And not just attachment parenting, but any kind of, I guess, parenting style that has felt like we have witnessed a reaction coming forward within us. And we worked really hard in that moment to not just notice and become aware, but in some ways suppress and respond differently. And we were talking about how in some ways we have felt really good about our capacity to respond to our child in a way that we feel is attuned to them and their needs, and in a way that we don't believe is perpetuating harm as best as we can, But just, my son is now 4 and her daughter is 6 years old. 4 to 6 years on into kind of parenting in this way, there is this kind of knowing arising within us that there has been a whole lot suppressed in that process. And for us, we were talking about this because it's manifested for us in physical form. We both have problems and inflammation with our teeth and our gums. And we were talking about how so much of that can be repressed anger. And we were sitting and we were reflecting, saying there's nothing really in my life that I'm angry about. And as we were discussing, we were like, oh, but there's been all of this reaction within me as my child has like grown and developed that has been present, that I recognize is reflective of the way that I have been brought up or what society has told me is right or wrong. And I've worked through all of that. But have I really? Like, has it all just been sitting? Could you speak to that, and maybe how aware parenting offers kind of a gateway that leads us down a slightly different path?
Yeah, I think, attachment parenting or gentle parenting or any of those forms of parenting, they're so beautiful. I mean, it's coming from the complete opposite, like you said. We've often all grown up with really strict authoritarian parents that would smack us and hurt us in ways that are unkind. And so this has swung the other way, and it's almost like a bit of a permissive way, which is like, just give the child everything and just you have no needs. And so in that, we get angry, like there is resentment, because we kind of like, we should love this child and we should love this baby, but at the same time it's like, it's really hard for me because I've got to show up in ways for you which never was done for me or held for me. So I think what aware parenting does, it's basically a form of democratic parenting. It looks at it in terms of like, we all need to get our needs met. And what I've come to learn over my little journey with it is really that there's always more layers. So it's not like we do the one layer and then it's all healed and then we're perfect and the kids are perfect. It's actually this parallel journey between whatever's happening for them is a reflection of something for me here. So when we're activated or we're feeling really triggered about something, it might be something that we've already looked at, but we just go into it even deeper than we did before because we're like, oh, this is going, there's more here for me to sit with. And this is where we need lots of different types of therapy. So, aware parenting brings up the relationship between the two of us. But this is where we need to do somatic work. We need to see a therapist. We need to sit in circle so that we can keep healing, because it's very, very, very complex and it's very deep. And the more that I show up and do all these things with myself, the more I can show up for my children. And when our children continuously reflect stuff all the time, it means that we're not shifting something. So they really are a beautiful mirror for us. I like to actually describe it as like an infinity symbol. And we're in these infinity symbols with them, and they tap into our energetic level. And if our energy has all this stuff like stuck in our part of the circle, they feed into that energy and they say, oh, mum, something's stuck here. I need you to shift it so that I can flow back through you and my energy can shift too. So we are just on this beautiful, amazing parallel journey with them. But it is really painful at times because it can bring up so many of those layers again and again and again. And we just have to keep feeling them and go deeper and maybe try a different form of therapy or whatever it is to really tap into what's being called to look at in that moment.
And there's such a beautiful discernment and challenging discernment that we need to bring to all of this, I think, to not just look at our children all the time as like, what are they mirroring back to me? What does this say about me? There's always this like, I don't know, like narcissism is not always a bad thing because it offers us the ability to reflect and to shift and to change, but it's the balance between what am I learning about myself in this process and what am I just holding as a unique experience of my child and their unfolding.
Totally.
I remember reading somewhere, I don't know where or when, but it has stayed with me that, as caregivers for our children, we can like consider ourselves, or we can be perceived as like the embodiment of divine love for them. And I just, that really moved me, and that really inspired and created an aspiration for how I wanted to show up for my child, and I keep that in mind in the way that I speak to him and I respond to him and the energy that I allow to flow through me. I love that infinity symbol analogy. And one of the things that my son will say to me, he's 4, like I said, if he's doing something and I'm trying to like redirect him or hurry him or whatever it is, and he knows that he's kind of like, pushing that edge, finding that edge. And it can be something so silly as taking a really long time to put his shoes on as we've left. And I'm redirecting him and saying like, I'd like you to put your shoes on now. We're leaving in 5 minutes. It's time to put your shoes on, all of that. When he notices, right, the days that I don't have capacity, time, patience within me to just really be of support, and I start really like pushing, demanding, like, no, you need to get your shoes on now. and he notices that within me. There's been so many times where he has said to me, Mum, do you still love me? And I've kind of just really, that has been such a jolting question because I spend so much of my time and my energy making sure that this child feels deeply loved. And so it has always struck me, this question has struck me, like, why is he asking me this? And what I have realized, what I have accepted in the gift of this question presented through my child is the way that I respond to him. Because it always creates that moment of complete connection where I come to him and I'm like, no matter what you do, I love you. Like, I always love you, mate. I can be frustrated or upset, or you can be doing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
I love you, and I look him in the eyes and I say, I love you, what it's actually gifted to me is how much I have wanted to know the answer to that question my whole life, my worthiness.
Yeah.
Am I divinely loved always, no matter what? And it's just been this real spiritual kind of realization that I don't think I've necessarily done anything in particular to prompt that question for my child, but that question has been gifted through him for me to have to answer with complete conviction. And in honoring his worthiness,
Yes,
I'm having to witness and face my own, because if I accept it and provide it for him, then I have to allow it for myself.
absolutely. I mean, that's just such a beautiful gift and such a powerful exchange of connection in that moment. So beautiful. Yeah. And it is like they reflect that, and we own what we need to own out of it as well, which is so beautiful, particularly if you can pick up and know the messages, right? Like for another parent, they might get really stuck into, oh my gosh, like, why do they think that? And then they will go into a spiral of their own worthiness without even really knowing. And I think it takes, as you said, that discernment and knowing, doing your own work to know that these are the messages that are coming through for a particular reason.
I'm wondering if you could speak to the necessity of women taking the time for themselves and being with self, so that it can be of support to their family. Because I know so many women, understand this logically, but struggle to put it in motion. And so I'm wondering if you could share your experience as a mum, how this has evolved within you and how you support yourself. Anything you have to share on that?
Yeah, I think in the society we live in, which is so nuclear, we just have this expectation as mothers, and particularly if we have times where we might be solo parenting or single parenting, even with a partner, they might be at work. So we're just doing it all. We might have a business that we're doing, then we're with our children, we might be co-sleeping, so we're giving them everything all the time. And so this comes back to what we spoke about at the start, where in attachment parenting that often brings up a lot of resentment. And so I remember after the birth of my second daughter, I was a bit scared to co-sleep at that stage because of society and what they labeled that as. So I was moving in between, like I was breastfeeding my newborn and getting her down, and then going into the toddler's room and patting her for 3 hours, and just doing this like in and out, no sleep, then up all day, and just feeling so depleted. And I remember just sitting there one day and I said to my partner, I just can't do this anymore. Like, it's not sustainable. I need space. I need to be able to breathe. I need to do something that's for me. I want to do art. I want to go back to dancing, all the things that make me who I am before becoming a mother. And he's like, okay, like, let's look at that and how we can do that. And I remember he suggested getting a babysitter to come in for 2 hours a week just so I could have that space. And I remember being really fearful of that, because that would mean maybe I'm a bad mother and I'm not coping, and all the stories that we tell ourselves and society tells us. And I got a babysitter to come in for 2 hours. We didn't have a lot of family support. I mean, it's great if you've got family, that makes it so much easier. But, if you don't, we have to do what we have to do. And it changed my whole world, because I think what happens is when we step away from our children and we have that space, particularly when they're not at school yet, or even if we're homeschooling, we're stepping away from them to go and feed and nurture us outside of the mothering. And when we do that, we can come back in and we feel like our whole energy level is like, I want to be here. I want to be present with you. I want to listen to your feelings. I want to help you put your shoes on, all those things. Whereas like when we're like stretched and we're tired and we're frustrated, and it's often around our bleed time as well, where we're just feeling like, oh, I just don't want to do the mothering. You're right. They feed into that and they're like, oh, okay, I can sense that you're a bit off. And then they start playing up. And so I think the more that it's about really nurturing ourselves in an ongoing way. So not self-care is in what we see all over social media of like having a bath and, doing this, which is all great and good, but it's something that's a ritual that's built in on a weekly basis, where it's really about getting consistent time away from the children to feel our feelings, to, do all those things that really nurture us so that we can come back to them as the authentic best versions of ourselves. And we can't do that when we're depleted and running on nothing. Often I hear mums will say like, oh, but I cook my children, this beautiful organic, amazing meals, and I do baking with them, and I do this and I do that. And I'm like, and what are you feeding yourself? Oh no, I'm just having, crackers or whatever, just whatever I can quickly eat. And I'm like, yeah, so that's what I mean. It's like we have to You know, we have to nurture ourselves. And I always come back to the analogy of when you're on an airplane and they, you know, if they say, if we ever have like an accident and you need to put the face mask, please put yours on first and then your children. It's the same thing. If we're not looking after ourselves, then we cannot come from this place where we really want to look after our children. And particularly if we are choosing to do a different form of parenting where there's no punishments and rewards and, you know, we're sending children away and creating disconnect, then we're not going to be able to show up in ways that are really enjoyable with them.
What I want to add to that too is that I think, you know, for so many of us, we want to show up with presence. We want our children to have a real sense of who we are, not just as the caregiver, but who we are as beings in the world and in their life. And I think in order for us to show up authentically, what authenticity truly means is not just being the like habituated, practice, rehearsed version of us. It's actually taking that time to be with ourselves, to connect with who am I in this season of my life, so that we can come back, not just like present because we've been recharged, but with a deeper understanding of what it means to be authentically me now.
Yes. 100%. Yeah, definitely. And I think when you're in the mothering and you're just in that monotonous, like, you know, I've got to cook the dinner and I've got to clean the food, like you have no space to feel what's really there, right? Like you said, it's just there's feelings, things, you know, accumulate. We might be getting angry and snapping and we don't know why. We're unconsciously just going through the motions of doing these things, where what you're speaking about is so true. We need to go away, craft out time, regular time to go away and to feel all of the things that are sitting there, because there are always going to be things coming up all the time, right? Like we never fully get to that place of like healing. That's the whole life journey. So we have to come to that place where we keep feeling. So we do show up authentically. And what that does, I believe, is role model to our children that it's okay for them to show up authentically. And that's what we want, right? Like we want children to grow up feeling deeply connected to who they are and how they show up in the world. And if we show them that there are things here for us that we need to work on, we need to go away, we need to sort that out, and we'll come back, it gives them that role modeling of, oh, this is normal, right? Like it's normal to feel this way. It's normal for me to be sad, and maybe I need to go sit and feel that for a little bit and then come back and speak about it. But because we haven't had this role model, we're sort of starting out and learning how to do this on our own. And it takes a bit of time and practice to sort of regularly build in those spaces for you to be able to do that.
I would love for you to speak on circles. One of the things that I notice within myself is that when I get around a group of caregivers who are open to the conversations of what it really feels like to be really conscious of the way that we parent and to be kind of progressive in our approach and deeply reflecting, I've often felt like, why do I sit in these groups and make myself sound like such a bad parent? Because I genuinely am so proud of who I am in the way that I provide care for my son and the relationship that I have. And I would walk away from these conversations being like, why did you just talk about all the ways that you're so wobbly? Why did you make yourself seem like you have no clue what's happening? What I have realized, what I have reflected on is that even within my home, the way that my husband and I view and see parenting is different.
Yeah.
Right. And so for a lot of the ways that I show up for my son and a lot of the things that I assert and a lot of the things that I maintain quite defiantly and demand occur within my home, make me feel like I have to have in some ways this kind of very proud, certain, sure facade about me so that I can be like, no, this is how it has to be, from a place of deep understanding and that mama bear protection, like don't come at me. And what I realized was maybe I'm not feeling safe, feels like I'm disrespecting my husband. He'd hate to hear that I say it. So it's not that, but maybe I don't allow myself to really express the challenge I have, the worry I have, the concern I have, for fear that it would mean, well, maybe the way that you're parenting isn't working for you and our son right now. And that I fear that means that we would revert back to more traditional styles of parenting that I truly don't want to see. And so that when I get in these circles with people that aren't actually going to threaten the harmony that I'm trying to create within my home, it allows me to have that like long exhale where I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. So could you speak to that?
Yeah, I think circle is such a unique space. Like, you know, there's such a mixed vibe about people and coming to circle, I think vulnerability is hard. Like most people are not vulnerable very willingly, and so they go out into the big wide world, and we have to put on a facade, like you said, and we show up and we're like, yeah, everything's good and it's great, and then you come into a circle and everyone's like, they're really dropping into their body, and like it just takes really one person to be really vulnerable, and then everyone's like, oh no, it is safe for me to be vulnerable here. And then usually we all share the one thing that I guess is not going well, and that's definitely, like what you're sharing is so common. It's definitely around our story and our imprint as women. We often focus on the really bad parts, like, oh, I shouted and this was so bad, and I've done this and it doesn't feel good, and da 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 da, and we spiral into this whole story about how everything's not going well. But the reality is, and that's just the brain focusing in on those parts, and they're the parts that we want to fix, and we want to shift it, and we want to change it, and that's beautiful. But often I like to say, let's also talk about something really positive here. Like, let's talk about how we can do more self-care and what that could look like. Or let's just share one positive thing that happened this week before we even go into the deep sharing, because the deep sharing is always going to be focused on these really sad parts of us that want to do better, are striving to do better, particularly when we're choosing other ways of parenting, because it is so hard. Like the bottom line is, it's hard. It's not easy to do, right? So yeah, I just think circle is that beautiful way of really just allowing everyone to let their guard down, because we don't get to do it in really very many other places. You might do it in one-to-one sessions, you might do it with a therapist, you might do it with a friend or a relative, if they've got that beautiful, empathic, non-judgmental way of being with you. But most people don't, and so circle is the first place, the first time that they're really able to do that. And I think that's pretty amazing.
I love how you suggested and shared that, like, it's useful to just really reflect and share something positive first. It reminds me of how important it is whenever we're kind of stretching ourselves or looking to kind of grow in any way, that we first tether ourselves to almost like a safe base that we have. If we're working with the body, like we do that with the breath, like really connecting with the breath, there's that safe space to come back. And I think if we're going to reflect on anything, particularly parenting, that is so charged with emotion.
Yeah.
It's the one thing that I think, like, it gets everybody kind of charged up in a way that's probably more sensitive than any other topic that we could speak on. It is really important to just tether ourselves to the aspect, the part, however small it is, that we feel like is okay, even if it's not great, even just it gets to be as it is.
Exactly.
And really being with that. Yeah,
I love that so much.
Danni, one final question, I guess today would be, as your children grow and change and develop, have you seen your own growth and progress kind of match theirs, or do you feel like there's a part of you that is aware that your own growth has been stunted in some way? I ask every woman to reflect on this, and everybody has a very different response.
I think parts of my growth have definitely changed with the girls. Like I definitely think things such as like reclaiming my menstrual cycle and my bleed time and moving into ritual and honoring myself as a woman and the different seasons of the woman has really flourished since having the girls, because I really wanted them to have a new story, which was that their bodies are beautiful and the bleed time is amazing, and like really, really harnessing that energy. And I think in terms of me as a person, like if I even think back to who I was 5 years ago when I fell pregnant, it was a totally different version of myself. And so I think I'm constantly meeting myself in new ways. But I do think there are parts of me that still need tending to. I think that teenage version of me is probably going to need a lot of work over the next few years, particularly as my girls come into those years. And then there's this version of me, which, my mum passed away at the end of last year, which was really sudden, as in the death was sudden, but she was unwell for a period of time. And I think with grief, there's this process where it just crashes over you. Like you're really great, and then all of a sudden, like the other day, I was in a local supermarket, and I saw a mum and a daughter around the same age as that my mum and I would have been, and they were like sharing their excitement over a product in an aisle. And it got to me, like I got teary, and I was like, wow, I missed that, but not even remembering that's what I missed about her. And I think what I struggle with in terms of that healing, really getting into that healing and feeling it, is that like because I am a mum, I don't have time to always sit with those feelings when they really come up. And so when that wave crashes over me, and I am, I say to the girls, I'm really sad, Gran died and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, at times I'm not able to be as present with that as I would really love to be. And then that gets pushed down, like you said, right? Like right at the start about the anger, that grief gets pushed down until it comes out in other ways. And so I think for me, there's definitely stuff there that I still need to work through, but I definitely feel like they push me in ways to sort of keep feeling things, to keep showing up. But there is, they're on their unique journey and I'm on mine. So I definitely think it's like a work in progress. Yeah.
I think our children too get to show us all the time, like just the truth of paradox, that two things get to exist simultaneously, that we can be aware of like this deep grief that is within us, but simultaneously there is that like deep love and connection and joy that's also present too.
Yeah, that's 100% how I feel about it. Like you've just hit the nail on the head, because it's like this deep grief of losing her and feeling really sad and wanting her, but also this amazing, like this polarity of like these two beautiful beams of light. And I just love them and enjoy them and want to be with them. So it is, they simultaneously exist in those moments where that grief becomes really, really big and powerful.
And it's powerful to like claim for ourselves that one doesn't have to cancel out the other.
Yes, I love that. Yeah.
Beautiful. Is there anything else you wanted to contribute to this conversation today? I feel like I could just keep talking to you all day, just ask you all the things. Such a beautiful presence, and I just feel like it's so lovely to just be held, particularly in a space where the conversation around parenting is so open.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. What do I want to contribute? I think just the invitation for everyone to, everyone is doing their best all of the time. And it's like you said, it's really hard. And often parenting is such a contentious issue, because if I'm doing it one way and it feels really good to me, it mirrors back to someone, well, hang on a minute, maybe I'm not doing the right thing. And then they get really stuck in there. Well, I think I'm doing the right thing. And it can become, like you said, it's often not held in spaces where we can just show up and share as it is. So just this invitation to find spaces that make you feel good, and to find people or mothers or groups or coaches or whatever it is to really connect with, to support you to be this authentic version of yourself, because I think that is so, so, so important.
Yeah. And also as well, I'd like to add, like, it's been really beautiful for me to find women such as yourself that highlight caregiving and parenthood and motherhood in a really positive and uplifted way.
Yes.
I'm all for really recognizing the challenge and the hardships that we face, but I'm not for kind of creating this sense that we're hard done by to be caregivers and mothers in this life.
Totally.
I truly believe it is the greatest gift that any of us could be given. And I know for myself, like, divinely guided as part of my purpose. So it feels so supportive to be held in spaces where we get to simultaneously be with the challenge, but for it not to just be like, let's just fling shit at how hard it is to be a mum in the world.
Yes, I'm so glad you named that. I mean, for me, and I talk to so many parents about this, but I think it's quite rare to find people who really love their children unconditionally. And I'm talking really love their children. I think I could maybe name a handful, because I really think there's this level of, if I'm not parenting a specific way and I'm not giving them everything and it's so hard, and, we get caught in this story that makes it really unenjoyable. And actually, like you said, it's just this deep connection, and we just need to enjoy it. Like sometimes it's just let go of all the story, let go of all the theory around it, but just be present with them. That's all they want. They just want you to love them. They just want to be connected to you. And I think if we can show up in really enjoyable ways that feel really good, we get to do that. And I think it's the most amazing gift, on earth, to be able to parent them and mother them and just love on them and just shape them. We're literally raising and shaping the next generation. So I think it's a really powerful, often underrated job that we're doing.
My final contribution to this conversation would be that as a mother, witnessing the potential and the capacity that I had to really just receive somebody as they are, and to really learn how to love them unconditionally, has actually supported my own self-love.
Yes.
In a way that no bubble bath was ever going to gift me.
I love that. Yes.
in witnessing the way that my heart could crack open, in witnessing the way that I can forgive instantly, that the way I can activate compassion, the way that wisdom arises within me, I was like, oh, wow, this is all within me, not just to offer up and contribute, but to hold and to experience as self for self. So
Yes.
I offer that because I think sometimes we're good at reflecting on who we are as caregivers and who we are as mothers and what we're doing well. And anything that we witness within ourselves, we get to realize and remember we get to give that to ourselves as well. And that beautiful infinity symbol comes to mind that you've offered today.
Yeah, love that. Thank you for that beautiful reflection. That feels really just fills my heart with so much joy.
Thank you so very much for your time and your space and your energy today. I have a ticket to come to a circle that's happening on the end of this month, 30th of October. So I'm very excited.
We'll get to meet in real time.
If women or caretakers listening today would like to connect with you further, where's the best place to find you?
Probably on Instagram. I have a website, which is The Way of the Woman, but it doesn't really, it's that my work changes so regularly that like I can't keep up. I don't know if that's like that for you, but it's like, oh, I'm doing this and then I'm doing this and I'm doing, so that's not up to date at the moment. It's going to go through a process. So probably just at Danni.Willow on Instagram is like the best place to find everything that I'm sort of running at the moment.
Beautiful. And I'll link everything in the show notes.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me. I so greatly appreciate it. It's been a beautiful conversation.
Thank you.